My name is Arthur Vance. At 42, I hold the title of founder and CEO of Vance Holdings, a company that over the last decade has redefined the San Francisco skyline. From the top of my glass penthouse, on the 45th floor, the city stretched out below me, like a complex model, forged in titanium and pure ambition. It was the golden hour. The autumn sun, filtered through the bay's characteristic cold fog, ricocheted off the skyscrapers. These buildings were in large part the tangible result of my vision. An acute, almost physical satisfaction ran through my body, knowing that every square inch of that urban landscape had been calculated, negotiated, and erected under my command. That afternoon wasn't just another day of operations. It marked the consolidation of my legacy. The new project, internally christened the Zenith, promised to be the tallest and most exclusive residential tower on the entire West Coast. The contract signing was scheduled for 3 o'clock. The cost of the Zenith was astronomical, but the projected return? It exceeded all expectations. There was, however, a single obstacle in the path, a complication I considered irrelevant. The central plot had been occupied for decades by the St. Jude Community Shelter. It was a structure of worn red brick, a pitiful spectacle of architectural neglect that clashed with the cold, modern elegance of our future development. Robert, my assistant, a methodical young man devoid of any sense of irony, entered the office. Without a word, he slid a tablet across the mahogany desk. The illuminated screen displayed the final eviction report for St. Jude. My fingers ran over the glass, absorbing the cold bureaucracy of the process. The relocation of 37 people, including 11 families, to facilities classified as adequate. I knew, of course, that this term was a euphemism. My mind, trained to see numbers where others saw lives, registered that operation merely as the final stage of risk mitigation before the big deal. I informed Robert that everything was in order. Demolition could proceed according to schedule. There was no guilt, only a sense of efficiency. Progress, I always believed, requires sacrifices, and my city's history was written in the ink of demolitions and reconstructions. However, something about that shelter's address bothered me. A pang of recognition, a residue of memory I thought I had eliminated. To ensure the past wouldn't haunt me on that crucial day, I decided to do one final check of the site. I needed to see the place being emptied, to close the cycle personally before the signing. 20 minutes later, I was standing on the dusty sidewalk. St. Jude was located in an area the touristy San Francisco preferred to ignore, a pocket of raw reality in the heart of technological luxury. The smell of diesel and dampness saturated the air. It was there, sitting alone on the concrete step of the already locked iron gate, that I saw her. She was a teenager, appearing no older than 15 or 16. She wore a gray hoodie, visibly too large for her thin frame. She wasn't crying, nor was she begging. She remained motionless, head down. Unlike any other young person of that age in Silicon Valley, her hands did not hold a phone. She held a book, with a worn and creased cover, reading with a concentration that defied the silent chaos of the street. The scene was a living paradox. Imminent progress, represented by my figure in a $3,000 suit, and silent resistance, embodied in that girl reading at a gate condemned to turn to dust. I felt a sudden, almost irrational need to interact with her, perhaps to assert my authority, to tell her that the future was coming, and she should leave. I approached. The dry sound of my Italian shoes against the ground made her look up. Her eyes, an intense brown, showed no fear, only deep exhaustion. I opened my mouth, about to offer $50 for quick charity and dismiss her, but the question I formulated was different, loaded with a curiosity I couldn't explain. I asked what she was reading, with such attention, in such an inhospitable place. She glanced briefly at the book cover, and then at me. Her answer wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't a plea or a shout of anger. With a calm voice, she told me the title of the work, and explained that it was the only thing her father had left her before disappearing into the streets of that very city. That simple sentence, spoken without drama, was what froze me. I expected to negotiate with poverty, but I had just stumbled into human dignity. Still stunned by the simplicity of her answer, I stood motionless on the sidewalk. The cold afternoon wind blew dust against the hem of my trousers. But my attention was entirely focused on that battered book in the girl's hands. She said it was all her father had left. It sounded like an accusation, though her voice carried no tone of vengeance. I pointed to the object. Trying to soften the rigidity of my corporate posture, I asked permission to see it. She hesitated. Her fingers gripped the cover tightly, protecting her only asset against the man in the suit. I explained, with a calmness I didn't truly feel, that I didn't intend to take it, only to look. Reluctantly, she extended her arm. When the book touched my hand, I was surprised by the weight. It wasn't a cheap paperback novel, nor a school edition. The leather cover was cracked, but of good quality. Upon opening it, I didn't find printed chapters of fiction story. The pages were covered in handwriting, dense, technical, interspersed with architectural sketches made in graphite. There were drawings of foundations, structural load calculations, sketches of steel beams. I recognized the stroke immediately. It was the work of someone who loved engineering, not for the money, but for the art of keeping things standing. I asked her if her father was an engineer. She nodded slowly, pulling her hoodie sleeves down to cover her cold hands. She told me he used to say that buildings had bones, just like people, and that if the bones were weak, the beauty of the facade didn't matter. She said he had worked on major projects in the city before losing his rhythm. My eyes scanned a specific page. There was a detailed drawing of a support system for unstable terrain. In the bottom right corner of the page, there was a signature, faded by time, but still legible, J. Miller. My stomach tied in a knot. The air seemed thin. I knew that name, Jonas Miller. 15 years ago, when Vance Holdings was just a risky bet, Jonas was the senior engineer I had pressured. I remembered, with painful clarity, firing him. I fired him for refusing to sign a report that would speed up a job by 3 weeks, but which, according to him, compromised safety. I replaced him with someone more flexible. The project was delivered, and my empire began to grow. Jonas vanished from the professional circuit. I closed the book slowly, feeling the weight of 15 years of moral negligence in my hands. I returned the notebook to her and asked for her name. She answered quietly, Elara. I asked where Jonas was now. Elara looked at the St. Jude shelter building, then turned her eyes back to me. She told me he had passed away in that shelter 2 winters ago. Victim of pneumonia, he didn't have the strength to fight. She said he spent his last days drawing in that notebook, assuring her that as long as she had his knowledge, she would have a future. The silence that followed was broken by the shrill ring of my cell phone. It was Robert. It was 2:45 p.m. The meeting for the signing of the Zenith, the project that would demolish the last place Jonas Miller lived, would start in 15 minutes. I should answer. I should get into the limousine, sign the papers, and let the bulldozer wipe that sad story off the face of the earth. That is what the Arthur Vance of yesterday would have done. But looking at Elara, I saw the daughter of the man I sacrificed on the altar of my ambition. I told her to wait for me there. I ordered her not to leave that gate under any circumstances. She looked at me with suspicion, asking why she should trust me. I replied that she had no reason to, but that I had an old debt to pay. I turned my back and answered the phone. Robert started talking about the anxious investors. I cut him off. I ordered him to hold the meeting. I said I was on my way, but the agenda had changed. I got in the car, but I didn't feel the usual comfort of the leather seat. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't thinking about profit. I was thinking about the bones of my empire, and if they were as rotten as Jonas Miller had predicted. The elevator ride to the 45th floor was the longest minute of my career. The hermetic silence of the cab contrasted violently with the noise of my thoughts. I saw my reflection in the polished metal doors, the same suit, the same posture. But the man inside, he had changed. I carried Jonas Miller's ghost on my shoulders, and Elara's image etched on my retina. When the doors opened, Robert was waiting for me. I walked straight into the main conference room, known internally as the Fishbowl. Inside, 12 men and women sat around the oval mahogany table. In the center, an illuminated model of the Zenith rose like a religious idol. It was magnificent, no doubt, but for the first time, I looked at the base of that plastic miniature and didn't see the future. I saw the St. Jude shelter crushed under the weight of our arrogance. Marcus Sterling, the lead investor, stood up to greet me. He pushed the leather folder with the final contracts toward me. The gesture was clear. Sign, and let's celebrate. I sat at the head of the table. I looked at the documents. The demolition order was on the third page, scheduled to begin in 48 hours. I closed the folder. The sound of leather hitting would echoed like a gunshot. Marcus stopped mid-smile. He asked if I had forgotten how to write my own name. I replied, without looking away, that I would not be signing the contract that day. Chaos was immediate. Nervous murmurs ran through the room. Marcus leaned over the table. He reminded me of the penalties, the millions already invested, the reputation. I knew I needed a plausible lie, something that spoke the language they understood, the fear of loss. I told them that during my final inspection, I identified a structural inconsistency in the adjacent terrain. I lied with the coldness of a poker player. I invented a concern about the water table stability. Using technical terms I vaguely remembered hearing Jonas use years ago, I said that if we proceeded without a new 72-hour assessment, the Zenith could be a catastrophic liability risk. The room went silent again. The word risk is the only thing that scares men like Marcus more than the loss of profit. He leaned back. His eyes were slits of distrust. He said I had 72 hours, not a minute more. I stood up and said my only interest was the solidity of our legacy. I left the room without looking back. In the hallway, Robert looked at me as if I had just set fire to the building. He asked, voice trembling, what he should tell the press. I ordered him to say nothing. I asked him to clear my schedule for the next 3 days. I bought 3 days, 72 hours. It wasn't much, but it was the only time I had. I was going back to the shelter. I returned to the shelter's district at dusk. San Francisco's streets change when the sun goes down. Technological elegance fades, giving way to long shadows. I walked fast. Turning the corner of 4th Street, my heart raced. The gate where I left Elara wasn't empty. 2 men in black tactical uniforms were standing over her. Elara was huddled against the cold metal, hugging the backpack where she kept the notebook. One of the guards was kicking the tip of her sneaker, ordering her to move along. The anger I felt wasn't corporate. It was primal. I advanced. I didn't shout. I used a low, icy tone. Step away from her. Now. The guard turned, but his flashlight illuminated my face. He recognized the suit. And then the man. He stammered a Mr. Vance, backing away immediately. I looked at Elara. She was shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I reached out a hand to help her up. For the first time, she saw that I was the supreme authority there, but that I was using this power to create a shield around her. Do you have a place to stay tonight? I asked. She shook her head. The shelter was locked. Come with me, I said. We need to talk about your father's notebook. I took her to the only place where I knew we wouldn't be disturbed, my office in the tower. Walking into the marble lobby with a street kid attracted stares, but no one dared to question me. In the elevator, she watched the numbers climbing. When we reached the 45th floor, the city was glowing down below. She went to the window and touched the glass. My dad used to say, "The lights from up here are beautiful because you can't see the dirt from down below," she murmured. That sentence hit me harder than any audit. I was about to find out that the dirt, in fact, was in the foundation of my own project. While Elara ate a sandwich, I opened Jonas's notebook. Calmly, I began to decipher the notes from the last few pages. These weren't the ramblings of a sick man. They were warnings. Jonas had spent his final days studying the cracks in the basement of the St. Jude shelter. His calculations pointed to something my engineers had ignored: liquefaction. The land where the shelter and the future Zenith would stand was 19th century landfill. Jonas calculated that with the weight of the 60-story tower, the ground would give way in less than 5 years, causing a catastrophic collapse. My billion-dollar project was literally a death trap, and the man I fired for being too slow was the only one who had seen the truth. I looked at Elara. She had fallen asleep on the sofa. The notebook wasn't just a keepsake. It was the salvation of my reputation and hundreds of lives. But to use that solution, I would have to cancel the demolition. I would have to redesign the Zenith completely. Profit would drop by half. The prestige would disappear. But looking at the serene face of Jonas's daughter, I realized the debt wasn't just financial. It was existential. I needed to prove that Jonas's vision was right. The next morning, when Robert entered the room, he knew the day would be long. Call the engineering team, I ordered, and get her some breakfast. Real food. The 72 hours were ticking. I took my core engineering team down to the damp basement of St. Jude. Elara came with us. She knew the building better than anyone. It was a surreal scene. Engineers in pristine white hard hats, following a teenager in a gray hoodie. She pointed out the fissures. She showed where the water rose. One of my senior engineers, Davis, scoffed. "This is 30-year-old technology, Mr. Vance. The ground is stable." Elara wasn't intimidated. "Water doesn't care about the years, sir. It just wants space." She picked up an iron bar and struck a false wall, revealing a hollow, damp cavity behind the concrete. Exactly as Jonas's drawing predicted. The silence was absolute. The sound of dripping water echoed like thunder. Davis paled. His measurements were wrong. Jonas was right. In that moment, Elara stopped being a street kid to them. She became the bearer of truth. However, as we stepped out into the daylight, I saw a black car parked across the street. It was Marcus's head of security. The secret had leaked. The war was about to start. I returned to the company only to discover that my access to the central server had been revoked. Marcus had acted fast. He called an emergency board meeting for the following morning, claiming I was mentally unstable. Robert came to me, pale. "They're going to vote for your removal as CEO tomorrow, Arthur. And they're going to authorize immediate demolition." I was cornered. If the machines started tomorrow, the proof of the ground instability and Jonas's legacy would be buried forever. I looked at Elara. I had millions in the bank. But in that moment, I felt as powerless as she had felt at the gate. "They want war," I murmured. "Then let's give them one," Elara said. "My dad used to say that when the structure is rotten, you don't patch it. You expose it." She was right. I needed to play by street rules. I grabbed my personal phone. I didn't call lawyers. I called the press. The next morning dawned with fog and the noise of diesel engines. Marcus had advanced the schedule. 2 gigantic excavators were positioned in front of the St. Jude shelter. I didn't go to the board meeting. I went to the shelter. When I arrived, the machines roared, ready to advance. I crossed the police cordon. I walked to the middle of the street, stopping exactly in front of the shovel of the first excavator. The operator honked, furious. I didn't move. Elara ran out and stood beside me. Then Robert joined us. The cameras arrived. The image was too powerful to be ignored. The CEO, forming a human shield against his own machines. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "Have you lost your mind, Arthur? Get out of there or you lose everything." "You can keep the shares, Marcus," I replied. "But if that machine moves 1 meter, the whole world will know we are building a tomb, not a building." The machines cut their engines. Silence returned to the street. I had won the physical battle, but the war in the boardroom still needed to be fought. The board meeting happened 2 hours later. I entered the conference room, still covered in street dust, with Elara beside me. I threw the revised technical report on the table. "The Zenith project will fall," I announced. "It's not a question of if, it's when." Marcus tried to argue, but the fear of lawsuits outweighed the greed. "I have an alternative," I continued. "Project Phoenix, a smaller tower, preserving the historic shelter structure. The ground floor will be a community tech center. The upper floors, luxury residential. Less immediate profit, but long-term sustainability." It was a risky bet. Finally, the bank representative spoke. "The tax exemption, is it substantial?" "It covers 40% of the revenue loss." I lied, rounding up with confidence. They voted. I kept my job, but with a condition. The project had to turn a profit in 2 years, or I would be out. I left the room and looked at Elara. She was crying silently. "We did it," I said. Dad did it, she corrected, hugging the notebook. 2 years have passed since that day at the gate. I'm standing on the sidewalk again, but the scenery is different. Where there were ruins, now stands a Phoenix building. It isn't the tallest tower in the city, but it is undoubtedly the most unique. The ground floor isn't an empty lobby. It is the Jonas Miller Institute. It is full of computers. Young people from underserved communities come and go. I enter the building. I am no longer the richest man in the city. I lost a jet. I lost a penthouse. But I have never slept so well. I walk to one of the classrooms. Up front, a young woman is teaching geometry applied to architecture. Elara no longer wears that giant gray hoodie. She is dressed in work clothes. She is in college for civil engineering, but she insists on teaching here. She sees me at the door and smiles. That tired, defensive look is gone. Jonas Miller died as a forgotten man. Today, his name is on a bronze plaque at the entrance. But his true legacy isn't the building. It's her. I learned that building empires is easy. Anyone with money can stack bricks. But building a future? That requires foundations that money can't buy. It requires us to stop and listen to who is sitting at the gate. I walk out to the street. The sun is setting. The same golden hour. Robert is waiting for me in the car. Where to, Mr. Vance? I look at the building, where the classroom lights are on, shining brighter than any corporate office. Home, Robert. I'm already home. 2 years have passed since that day at the gate. I'm standing on the sidewalk again, but the scenery is different. Where there were ruins, now stand the Phoenix building. It isn't the tallest tower in the city, but it is undoubtedly the most unique. The ground floor isn't an empty lobby. It is the Jonas Miller Institute. It is full of computers. Young people from underserved communities come and go. I enter the building. I'm no longer the richest man in the city. I lost a jet. I lost the penthouse. But I have never slept so well. I walk to one of the classrooms. Up front, a young woman is teaching geometry applied to architecture. Elara no longer wears that giant gray hoodie. She is dressed in work clothes. She is in college for civil engineering, but she insists on teaching here. She sees me at the door and smiles. That tired, defensive look is gone. Jonas Miller died as a forgotten man. Today, his name is on a bronze plaque at the entrance. But his true legacy isn't the building. It's her. I learned that building empires is easy. Anyone with money can stack bricks. But building a future? That requires foundations that money can't buy. It requires us to stop and listen to who is sitting at the gate. I walk out to the street. The sun is setting. The same golden hour. Robert is waiting for me in the car. Where to, Mr. Vance? I look at the building, where the classroom lights are on, shining brighter than any corporate office. Home, Robert. I'm already home.